to those of us on the East Coast, and good morning to those of you, Pacific and Mountain Time joining in, as well as Central. I know we got folks in Wisconsin here as well. I want to welcome you guys to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. My name is Jerry Shockey. I oversee all the educational programs here, and we're pleased to have each and every one of you joining in here today for our Heart of the Hall of Famer series, featuring Hall of Famer James Lofton. As you see, you'll see him here in just a moment. But the real idea and the premise behind this, and I'll keep things brief just so we have time to jump right in. I know we're running a little bit behind, and for those schools that didn't hear, again, I apologize. Wrong directions were sent, and we gave James the wrong school. So we appreciate everyone's flexibility and patience, and we are now ready to get started. So I want to thank everyone for their patience. The real idea and premise behind Heart of the Hall of Famer is what it took to get into the Hall of Fame beyond just the athletic ability. And, Robert and Cisco, can you guys mute real quick? Thank you. The real idea and the premise behind this program is to illustrate what it took to get in the Hall of Fame beyond just the athletic ability. We know that they're great examples of athleticism, but it took more than that to get in the Hall of Fame. It took the great character values that it takes, and those that you guys are studying: the trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, caring, fairness, citizenship, those 6 pillars that you guys are studying. Because the one thing that can be said about most of our Hall of Famers, if their God-given ability didn't lie in pro football, they would have excelled in some other life endeavor. And Mr. Lofton is a perfect example of someone who's excelled not only on the field, receiving the highest honor that you can receive as an individual player, being inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but also quite a lot of achievements and accolades off the field, as you hear me talk about here in just a moment. So I want to thank all the schools for tuning in here, and I would like to recognize those schools at that time, just so you not only can see each other, but so Mr. Lofton can see what schools are tuning in and where they're coming from. Number one is, let's see if we can hear from, and feel free to unmute your mics at that time and give a shout out for your school, some school spirit. Let's go to Robbinsdale Cooper High School, Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Very good. That's pretty good start there, Robbinsdale. I like that. Very good. Go ahead and mute your mics, and let's go to not too far away from you guys in Robbinsdale and Prairie Farm, Wisconsin. Let's hear from the folks at Prairie Farm. Uh-oh, I think the Packers outdid the Vikings. Thank you, Prairie Farm. And can we go to Arizona, Scottsdale? We have Salt River. And maybe not. Maybe they're a laid-back environment in Arizona. Maybe they didn't want to feel like talking too much. And then last but definitely not least, we have Battlefield Middle School in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Okay, thank you, Battlefield. We appreciate you guys tuning in here today. And this all would not be possible without the help of our friends at Tamberg, now part of Cisco, as well as our folks at eTech Ohio. So I want to thank those folks for being in part, and as well as the teachers, the tech coordinators, all the folks that make this possible for the schools. We definitely appreciate your support. But with that being said, I'm going to turn things over here in just a second to our featured speaker, Mr. James Lofton. But before I do that, I want to read a little bit of information about our featured speaker. And again, it's James Lofton from the class of 2003. He was selected by Green Bay in the first round of the 1978 NFL Draft. He was a deep threat receiver, possessed both speed and great hands, and recorded more than 50 receptions in a season 9 times. First NFL player to score a touchdown in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. In 16 seasons, he got 764 passes for over 14,000 yards. And at that time, when he broke that 14,000-yard mark, that was actually at that time, Jerry Rice holds all the records now pretty much for receiving. James Lofton was the career leader in reception yardage at his retirement. He was named All-Pro 4 times, All-NFC 3 times, and he was selected to play in 8 Pro Bowls throughout his career. Now that's a little bit of information about his his on-the-field achievements, but what I think you'll find is just equally as remarkable, if not even more so remarkable, are his off-the-field achievements. And I just picked out a few that I thought really stood out to me, and I'd like to share those with you. His education, he graduated from Stanford University, one of the great institutions in the United States, with a degree, and get this, industrial engineering. So he's not only athletic, but super intelligent as well. His athletic achievements beyond just football included he was an All-American track and field and football in Stanford, as well as, get this, he competed in the Olympic trials in 1976. His athletic honors include not only a Stanford Hall of Fame, the Miller Man of the Year finalist, as well as the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame, and obviously the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Post-football, he has coaching experience with the Chargers as well as the Raiders as a wide receiver coach. And currently, he's a talent on NFL Sunday Night Football for West One Wide Radio. He's had other endeavors as well as the James Lofton TV show in Green Bay as well as Buffalo, Pac-10 preview show, CNN, NBC NFL, and Fox Sports. Not only is he involved with other career endeavors, but obviously as well as community and fundraising. And I picked those out that I thought would be very interesting to some of the schools that are tuned in because of where you're located at, because he's done stuff in your areas. He was March of Dimes spokesman in Wisconsin, part of the Milwaukee Ballet board member. He was a fundraiser for Golden House, Green Bay's first domestic violence shelter, a United Way spokesman for Green Bay Packers, as well as Wisconsin Special Olympics volunteer. So our folks that are tuned in from Wisconsin greatly appreciate, as we all do, your services in their area. And then I know we have a school, not in this session, but in the afternoon, he also participated in fundraisers in Dallas, Texas. Personally, he's been married for, get this, 28 years. That's quite an accomplishment within itself, to his lovely wife, Beverly. He has 3 children, David, Daniel, and Rachel, and he's a member of the Rock Church in San Diego. So if you can all, for a second, unmute your mics for the time being and join me in giving a warm round of applause to Hall of Famer James Lofton. Now, before we ask James to share his opening remarks, I do have a quick video to give you a little old school look at James and his prime with the Packers and the Bills. Let's go ahead and go to this.
The great hands and even greater speed of wide receiver James Lofton made him one of the premier. In the history of the league, 14,004.
Okay, Mr. Lofton, the microphone is yours.
Well, I enjoyed getting to watch those old video clips of myself. I'm just glad that they weren't in black and white. I am a big numbers person, so whenever I hear somebody start to rattle off numbers, 1970 this, 1980 that, I start scratching my head. I'm pretty sure that the kids, most of you in middle school, I know Arizona, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Virginia we have covered. I know you're thinking, how old is this guy? Well, I'm 54 years old. Jerry had most of my stats correct. I've actually been married for 30 years, and I have 3 children. Now, my kids, David, Daniel, and Rachel, my daughter's 20 years old. I have a son who's 23 years old, and another son who is 27 years old. And what's ironic is they're actually all in college right now. I have one at UCLA, another one at Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene, Texas. And my oldest son, David, is actually in business school right up the road in Malibu, California, at a school called Pepperdine. So that's where my kids are. This is going to be fun for me. I hope you guys will enjoy it. In the classroom, maybe you don't have to do your regular work, but I know you've done a lot of prep work in getting ready for this. And the one thing I wanted to do, I looked at those 6 pillars that character is built upon. And I thought it was kind of neat to kind of just go over them and give you a little bit as to what I might think about them before we get started. And the first one, trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. Now, you kind of throw those words out there, and the one thing I think about all 6 of those words is that they all take some sort of action. And when I started thinking about it, I started thinking, okay, trustworthiness. How do you go about that? Well, you have to gain someone's trustworthiness. So you have to, like I said, it's an action one. Respect. that was really interesting because on the football field, we always thought that you had to earn the respect of your opponent. Responsibility, that's something you have to show. And anybody who's an older brother or an older sister, probably at some point you were asked to watch your younger brother or younger sister. And so that's something that you had to show that you had the responsibility. Fairness, well, that's something that you can maybe demonstrate almost every day, and it's, like I said, you demonstrate it. Caring, I thought that this was a really interesting one because this is something that kind of has to develop inside of you. And then the last one, citizenship, and I thought about citizenship, I remember my first report cards, they would have a grade for citizenship, and I always wondered what that was. Well, it just means that you're the member of a larger community, whether it's your family, your classroom, maybe your city that you live in, the state, even the country that you live in. So that's something that's always on display. And the other thing I think that, we're kind of constantly working on these things and constantly improving. We're never really the finished product. I had a coach say to me once, he said, your habits are either good or bad. And that didn't make a lot of sense when he first said it, but then I started thinking about it. Yeah, he's right. Your habits are good or bad. You can look at my hair right now, or my lack of hair. When I was in high school and junior high school, I had a big afro. So imagine me with a lot of hair like this. I had a habit when I took tests and when I studied a lot that I would pick the hair right out here. So I had dents in my afro. And my friends would look at me and say, how'd you get those dents? And I said, I don't know how I got them. I didn't realize that when I was under stress, I was kind of like pulling my hair out. Now it's kind of all falling out. But that's the way that goes. And the other thing I think that it's hard to kind of look at ourselves and see what we're not strong in and what we're the weakest in. So I think that's something that when you look at these 6 pillars, you can always improve on them. You're always going to be growing, and they all take action. So that's kind of where we'll get started. Jerry, I don't know what format you want to go. Do we have question and answers from the student body? I would love to field some of those.
That's exactly it. And, the one thing I didn't recognize, because there's students in there, and obviously they're being very quiet in the back of the broadcast, but I never got you guys at High Tech High School the opportunity to show your school spirit. So why don't you guys say hello or give a little cheer? They're there to keep James in line, I think. So
now Jerry, we have to mention that how many High Tech Highs locations are there in San Diego? There are 7. And actually this morning, I was at the wrong location. So I was about 40 miles away, and I hustled over here and got over here on time. So it's nice that the freeways were clear.
Yes, and I already alerted all the schools. It wasn't your fault that I sent you the wrong address. I took full part of character is taking accountability. So I taking responsibility for it. So and I'm already working out with our director that I will deduct the mileage and the expense for the mileage directly out of my check before that. So thank you.
It's nice that you're so caring.
Thank you. Thank you, James. So what we're going to do today here with you guys is we're going to rotate around in order, and I'll go by the order of reservation. We're going to start with Robbinsdale, go to Prairie Farm, Salt River, and then Battlefield. And you guys are going to have the opportunity to ask questions. And I know you guys have submitted your questions in advance, so we know a little bit of an idea of the questions that you're going to have. But, if there are any others that you have, you may be able to chime in as well. But what I really encourage you guys to keep in mind here is you are talking to one of the greatest players who has ever played in the National Football League. There have been over 20,000 players that have played in the National Football League, including guys like Peyton Manning and Jason Taylor shoulder pads you see behind us. There are only 267 members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and out of that, only about 230 of them are actually players. So you get an idea of how big of an honor. So you're talking about, when you talk about the wide receivers today, whoever you think is a big-time wide receiver in the NFL, I know Packer fans, you have your favorites there, and Vikings fans, you have your favorites there. But I would think it's safe to say that they want to be in Mr. Lofton's shoes someday and be enshrined into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I think it's safe to say that they'd like to be in his shoes off the field as well, as successful of a post-career as he's had. So you guys have the opportunity to find out what obstacles, what barriers, and really come to find out that aside from maybe the fro, you guys are pretty much the same. He came from the same shoes that you guys did and sat in class or classroom just like you guys did. So this is your opportunity to be able to ask those questions. But what we'll do first round, we'll go through two questions from each school. If you guys can make sure to keep your mics muted until we call upon you. and then after that, we'll go through a second round or third round, as many rounds as we can, to ask questions for about the next 35, 40 minutes. So with that being said, our friends at Cooper High School, who, Mr. Lofton, you probably don't know this, I didn't tell you, but they actually hosted Randall McDaniel about 6 months ago at their high school, doing the same exact thing that you're doing here today. So Cooper High School, go ahead with your questions.
What was your greatest moment of your football career?
Great. Well, okay, that's a good question, and I see you guys a little nervous about it. I Cooper High. I played 16 years in the NFL, and this is a little bit of a story, because people ask me this from time to time. Like I mentioned, I have 3 kids, and in 1991, Buffalo Bills were playing the New York Jets. My oldest son, David, was 7 at the time and was about to turn 8. The team that we had with the Buffalo Bills just happened to have really older players on the team, so there were a couple other boys who were his same age. And my wife normally sat behind our bench, but up in row 47. So I would look up and I would see her, and before a game, and I'd wave, "Hi, honey, how you doing?" And she would bring our 2 sons at the time to the game, David and Daniel. And Daniel was, I guess he's 4. Like I said, David is almost 8 years old. And in this game against the New York Jets, it's late in the year, so it's a cold, snowy, wintry day. But I noticed that David and his friends John Richer and one of the other, Pete Betzlar's son, were all sitting in the first row right behind our bench, which was unusual for them. And really, right behind the bench is not a great seat. You can see the players in the sideline, but you probably can't see the field real well. Well, in this game, late in the game, I caught 2 passes that helped us win the game. We gained home field advantage for the playoffs. We won the division. So it was a really big deal. And it's, like I said, it's December. It's cold. It's wet. Kind of snowy. And so after the game, I'm being interviewed, and I'm kind of the quote, the hero of the game. Well, when I caught the game-winning touchdown, I thought to myself, boy, this is a ball that I'd love to keep and maybe, put on the trophy case. And so my teammates were coming over and congratulating me, and I ran over and I handed it to my son, who was sitting in the first row. And there was a player who played for the Dallas Cowboys at the time, Emmitt Smith. Maybe some of you guys saw him on Dancing with the Stars. Well, Emmitt Smith kept every football that he ever scored a touchdown with. So at his house, he had over 200 balls. And so in my mind, this was going to be the first one I was going to put on the trophy case and do all that. So after the game, like I said, I'm being interviewed. I come out of the locker room, and my wife is there with my little son, Daniel. And I said, "Well, where's David?" And she says, "Oh, he's out in the parking lot with the boys." So I walk out there, and that ball that I was going to take and put on the trophy case at home, David and the other kids are thrown around in the parking lot. And you figure a parking lot is gravel. It's wet because it's been snowing. And that ball looks like it's about 10 years old now instead of a brand new ball. But it made me realize that a ball that I thought was going to be a trophy, kids, my son and other boys, they just want to play with it. And so it kind of put it in perspective. Here I had this great game, wanted this ball to be a trophy, but the biggest trophy was allowing my son to play with a ball that had been used in the game. I didn't know that was going to garner any applause.
Ask it.
All right. What led you to football, and who created you out of college, out of high school, actually?
Okay, I'm going to go back a little further. I went to Washington High School in Los Angeles, California. And we traditionally did not have a great football team. And that's stretching it, I think before I got there, they had won maybe 4 or 5 games over the last 10 years. So it's a pretty bad team. And when I was getting ready to go to school there, I said, I'm going to go out for the football team. And our school started in the 10th grade, and people said, "Oh, you're crazy. Why would you go out for the football team?" Well, I went out for the football team. We had a varsity team. We had a junior varsity team, and we had what we called a B team. The B was kind of the lowest qualification. And on the B team, they took your height, your weight, and your age, and they used those exponents. And if you were low enough, you could play on the B team. Well, I was a quarterback in high school. I played on the B team, and I was the second string B quarterback. And at the time, I was 5'10", and I was about 135 pounds, which is pretty slim. And I was second string on the B team. Our B team was actually pretty good. We won 7 games that year. We lost 2. The varsity was 0-9. So the next year, I go through a little bit of a growth spurt, and I grow about 3 inches, maybe 4 inches, and I'm just a little bit over 6 feet tall, and I'm about 155 or 60 pounds. And I end up going from the second string quarterback on the B team to the starting quarterback on the varsity team. Well, because I'm such a great football player, our team goes 2-7 that year, so a little bit of an improvement. And the next year, my senior year, I'm a big stud on campus. We win 5 games and we lose 4 games, so a pretty good improvement. The thing that always, kind of was curious to me is after I left, the team continued to get better. So it wasn't me, but somebody asked me about being recruited out of high school. When the recruiters from Stanford came to watch this other player play a game against me, against Fremont High School, they saw me. I played offense, I played defense, I kicked off, I punted. We lost the game, but I guess the guy was interested in me as a player that game.
Thank you, Robbinsdale. Robbinsdale, you guys mute your mics, and I know the folks at Prairie Farm, Wisconsin are probably pumped up to ask questions, one of their own here, I guess you could say. So go ahead, Prairie Farm, with your questions.
Jordan, working on it. Hi, my name is Jordan Thompson. I'm in 6th grade. Who did you look up to before you entered the NFL?
It's funny. You guys probably know a little bit of Green Bay Packer history. My first coach with the Green Bay Packers was Bart Starr, and everybody knows who he was. He was the first Super Bowl winning quarterback in Super Bowl I and Super Bowl II, and so far the Packers have had 3 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, Brett Favre being the other, and Aaron Rodgers this year. I see Aaron Rodgers sitting in the front row right there, number 12. Nice jersey. When I was with the Green Bay Packers, there was a quarterback that I had looked up to. I mentioned I played quarterback, and his name was Johnny Unitas. And Johnny Unitas is also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And we had a preseason game against the Baltimore Colts. They were in Baltimore at the time. They weren't in Indianapolis. And I was doing some stretching on the field. And I heard Bart Starr's voice behind me. My back was turned to him. And he said, "Can you believe that this guy thought that you were better than I was?" And I turn around, and I'm in my 3rd year in the NFL. I think I'm 25 years old. I turn around, and there's Johnny Unitas standing next to Bart Starr. And I felt like a 10-year-old kid again, because he was the guy that I idolized, and I got a chance to meet him, and he's one of the legendary quarterbacks. He had a flat-top haircut. He wore high-top black shoes, and he was kind of the Peyton Manning or the Aaron Rodgers of his own time. So Johnny Unitas was my big hero, and it's always a nice, funny story when Bart Starr and I get together, because he'll remind me of the fact that I thought that Johnny Unitas was a better quarterback than he was. Good question.
Go ahead with another, Prairie Farm.
Was Green Bay the best place to play football? And in your opinion, does Wisconsin have the best fans?
Well, let me ask you guys this.
That's a loaded question there.
That's not a loaded question. Where is Prairie Farm located? Where are you guys? What are you guys close to? Oh, you guys are by okay.
By Rice Lake.
All right. Okay.
By Eau Claire.
Okay, I know where Eau Claire is. And for those of you guys who don't know, you guys are about an hour-and-a-half drive away from Green Bay. That's about right, if your parents don't drive too fast, right? 4 hours?
Yeah.
They're really in a slow lane then. Okay, the question was, do I think that the Packers have the best fans? And right now I work as a broadcaster, so I get to visit a lot of the great stadiums around the NFL. I've been to the new stadium in Dallas, Texas. I've been to the Pittsburgh Steelers where they play. I've been to the new Giants Stadium. Green Bay does have the best fans. They have the best stadium. And this year they also have the best team. So, hey, that was a no-brainer. Green Bay is the best.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the questions, Prairie Farm. And James, let me talk to you real quick about those 6 pillars as we look at them, and you kind of referred to them. And one of the popular questions that we get from a lot of students that do this program is, and I'll ask you the same thing, and hopefully I'm not stealing any other schools' questions here, but which pillar character do you think is your strongest, and which one do you think is your weakest? Because we all need to identify what we're weak at, whether it's in athletics or whether it's in school, whatever it might be. Which one do you think is your strongest and which is your weakest?
My kids would tell you that I'm real big on quotes, and I can throw a quote out there for almost anything. And someone once said that your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. And somebody said, well, how can that be? Well, if you are somebody who has really firm convictions and you really believe that your thinking is right, then you could be a little inflexible. So when I look at the 6 pillars of strength, what I kind of think of is I think of a table. And on each end of that table, you have like 3 legs. And so on one end, you might have trustworthiness, respect, and responsibility. On the other end, fairness, caring, and citizenship. And anytime you come up a little bit short, and I mentioned that they're all action, so you're going to be asked to kind of show these actions all the time. So there might be a time where your trustworthiness might come in question. There might be a time when your citizenship might come in question. That might not be the best person in a group situation or something like that. So me specifically, the things that I probably have to work on the most would be caring. Because I tend to kind of be black and white sometimes, and you say, okay, well, that person should have done this. But then when I'm pushed to it, I feel like, I am probably pretty sensitive. My wife said that recently with our kids, you're not coming down on them harder. You need to be, this or that a little more. But what I found that as a parent, what I try and do is I try and respond to something as opposed to reacting to something. So that part of caring I've kind of worked on a little bit. The one thing that I think that I would love to think that I'm really high on would be trustworthiness. So if you say you're going to do something, people can count on you to do something and do that thing. And I think that's a real important trait to have. But I don't know if you could ever say that you're complete in any of them, because like I said, you're always a work in progress and you're always trying to get better.
Thank you. And let's go to our friends at Salt River. I think you guys I just got an email from you. I think maybe you're either running behind or you're not going to make it. I'm not sure what the email, how it read, but Salt River in Arizona? Nope. Okay, that's fine. Let's go to Battlefield, Fredericksburg, Virginia. You guys been waiting patiently there.
Yes, we're ready.
Go ahead with your questions.
Mr. Lofton, we had a question. This year our football team was 0-6. And our question for you is, when times got rough for you, you said your team was 2-7. What's some advice you could give our guys for going 0-6, considering most of our players were 7th graders, are going to be 8th graders next year? So what are some good characteristics they need next year?
I think that what you really have to do, and one of those pillars you talk about respect. And respect is something that you guys really earned last year because you went 0-6. And I'm pretty sure that there were times when you wanted to quit, when you wanted to throw in the towel, when you didn't want to come to practice the next week. So you learned through adversity last year. And you only grow through that adversity. People think about steel that holds up buildings. And the way that steel is forged is you heat it up under great heat, and then you pressurize it to make that steel. So you guys have been forged, and I know you're relatively close to where the Steelers are, and so that steel, that hot molten lava, then you take it and you pressurize it. You guys should be better next year. Hopefully you will be. 0-6 is tough, but I'm sure that with some resiliency that you guys will be ready for this coming season.
And a question my guys are real anxious to ask you is, who is your biggest rival cornerback playing, and how did you overcome playing against this gentleman?
Well, it was interesting because like I said, I got to play 16 years. And when I first started playing, I was a 22-year-old rookie. I would look at a player who was 26, 27 years old. I think, man, that guy's old. I could beat him. And I ended up, I ended up playing until I was 37 years old. So there were guys who, when I first started playing, that, you know, I kind of looked at and I was a little bit in awe of, and then as my career went along, I was able to beat them. So the thing that I found that you're really not competing against that other person, you're competing against yourself. And you're trying to do the best that you can. I know that may sound a little corny, but it's much like your team was last year. You're just trying to improve upon some little things. And yes, your opponent's there, and you're trying to defeat that opponent, but if you can make yourself better, and if you can work on your skills, you can get better. But I did have two teammates when I played for the LA Raiders, Mike Haynes, who is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and the other defensive back was a guy by the name of Lester Hayes, and he wore stickum all up and down his jersey. They were the top tandem in terms of defensive backs. So if you look at a guy like Darrelle Revis, they were just as good as he is, who plays for the New York Jets, and you had two of them, so they were both on the same team, so it's really tough going against those guys. And I went against them every day in practice for 2 years, so they made me a better player because I had to work hard in practice.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Lofton.
I just want to know about the 0-6 team. Were there any close games?
Yes, there were some few at the end. We were all 7th graders, and we were playing against a bunch of 8th graders, and we never quit. And they did a really good job, so we're looking forward to a good season next year.
Well, are some of anybody in the classroom there on the team, raise your hand?
This man right here is our fullback.
He's the only one?
He,
looks like
here, yeah, he's the only one.
It looks like some of those other guys have some pretty good size, so I'd start recruiting them now.
Oh yeah, we'll be ready next year.
Good luck to you guys.
Thank you, sir.
But to echo what Mr. Lofton's saying, those obstacles, whether it's in the form of Mike Haynes or Darrelle Revis, a current NFL player, whether it's a test that you're taking, whether it's a job that you're doing, whatever it might be, you're not always going to have the end result of a 6-0 season. You're not always going to have the end result of being a Hall of Famer. You're not always going to have the end result of winning a Super Bowl or even getting an A on the test. But some will say the real reward is what you guys went through. And as Mr. Lofton said, you persevered through heavy adversity, and a lot of folks couldn't do that. So you guys should be very proud that you guys were able to persevere throughout the season and stick to it. That says a lot about who you are. And I think it's fair to say that your students that stuck through it, they're going to overcome a lot of obstacles in their life because of that stick-to-itiveness that they have. So I'm proud of you guys. That's awesome to be able to do that. Let's go back to the top of the lineup here, if we will, and go to our friends at Robbinsdale again, Cooper High School. Go ahead if you have. Looks like we got about 20 minutes left. If you got a couple questions there, go ahead.
What was your personality on the field? Like, were you
Mr.
aggressive,
Grouchy.
cocky, or something like that?
Now, tell me your name so I can answer you directly.
Oh, my name is Locke.
Is that your first name or last name?
That's my first name.
Is it L-O-C-K-E or?
L-O-C.
Oh, just L-O-C. What is it? Is it short for something?
It's short for it means something in Vietnamese.
Okay, all right, I got you. My personality on the football field, because I played a position where the job description was to catch the ball, and I would jokingly say to get out of the way. But you still have to be pretty tough. You have to be tough mentally, and you have to be very determined. It's funny, now that I'm a broadcaster, now that I'm a parent of boys who play football, you watch the game and you want people to respect it, not do goofy stuff, not showboat too much. And I also coached, and I coached for the San Diego Chargers, and I coached for the Oakland Raiders, and I coached for 7 years. So I was around players, young kid guys, and I know that, the first time you're out there and you do something silly or goofy or, that the fans might be into, there were a couple times when, I had some end zone dances that I made up. I backed into the end zone a couple of times as opposed to running forward, and so that could be construed as showboating a little bit. And you go through phases, and like I said, we're never the finished product. We're always kind of evolving and changing and developing and growing. So personality on the football field, I had a lot of fun. I was a jokester a little bit in the locker room with the guys around me. But what was interesting is, for some reason, I never developed that locker room language. And when my oldest son, David, who I talked about earlier, I was taking him to the barbershop one day. And I told him, I said, Dave, we're going to the barbershop, and you may hear a couple of bad words that you haven't heard around the house. And David was, like I said, 7. And I said, these are words that, I don't say, and I don't really care for you to repeat. And he said, I've heard the F word. And I said, what? And I said, who'd you hear say that? And he mentioned one of my teammates. And so I went and told a teammate of mine, because this guy was really a pretty straight-laced guy, and he was just shocked. And it's funny, in the heat of things, people throw kind of the etiquette out of the window. And I would challenge you guys that what comes out of your mouth is really a reflection of what's in your brain. And there are a lot of words that you can use to substitute for some of those kind of like toilet words, is what we used to call them when my kids were little. And so that's a challenge. If you guys are playing sports, to be able to stay clean in your language on the field.
Maybe we should have had Kobe Bryant listen to this talk here.
Yeah, put a bar of soap in Kobe's mouth.
That's right. and let's go to Coopers. Do you have another one, or is that it?
What motivated you to play football?
Yeah.
It was just something that I had always done, and but the motivation kind of changed a little bit, because like I mentioned to you guys, I was on that B team, and I was a second string on the B team in the 10th grade, and then all of a sudden I get thrust into a starter the next year on the varsity. So my motivation was always different. And when I went to college, I was, let me see if I can get the terminology correct. For the first 3 years I was in college, I was a bench warmer. I didn't play a lot. And we had a coaching change. A new coach came in, Bill Walsh, who ended up coaching with the San Francisco 49ers later and won Super Bowls there, came in, and he was my coach my senior year, and he really developed me as a player. So I was really fortunate that I was at the right place at the right time. But the thing that for me that was always fun, and I hate to say this, sports were always fun. Working out was fun. I even enjoyed, I hate to say this, I enjoyed going to class. I enjoyed being around my students. I was fortunate that I even enjoyed studying a little bit. I mean, I know that sounds corny, but doing the schoolwork, and I think what it was is I enjoyed doing things well, and I didn't want to take a backseat to anybody. So I was pretty competitive on the field and off the field.
And I thank you, Robin. I think you'll find, as Mr. Lofton shares a lot of his remarks, and he talks about some of his achievements, and maybe if he asks a question about his attitude. All this comes with great preparation. He was able to go on to a Hall of Fame career because of his preparation, but he takes, I'm sure he takes that same attitude and that same preparation into his current job as a talent on the radio. Because when you guys hear the glory part, him talking on the radio, or seeing, Mike Tirico or Troy Aikman or Joe Buck or whoever it is, you see the glory element of it, being on national TV and talking about football, but you don't realize the preparation that goes into researching the teams and histories and all the stuff that goes into being on the radio, being on TV. So I would imagine that he takes that same attitude in preparing for his broadcast. Would that be a safe assumption there, Mr. Lofton?
That would be very correct. And I would say for the students that you want to find in life something that you're passionate about. And sometimes people wind up in a job that they're passionate about. Sometimes you don't end up in a job that you're passionate about. Your passion may be your extracurricular activities. You may be a person who loves hiking, and then you can transfer that into, okay, when I'm an adult, I'll take out some youth groups and teach them how to hike. So you can turn things that you're passionate about either into your job or into extracurricular activities, but find something that you love to do and something that benefits other people, and you can really be a blessing to a lot of people.
Okay, thank you, Cooper. Let's go to Prairie Farm. If you have a couple questions, go ahead with those.
I can't because it's not on right now. I'm sorry. We actually are trying to get our class up. The class that was in here left, so we don't have any questions at this time.
The teachers don't have any questions?
No, the students are not in here any longer. It's just a calculus class. So if you want to help us with our calculus, but no, actually, I'm just trying to get our session started. We have a different class, so the class that was in here watching left. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Mr. Lofton, you heard that he has an engineering degree, so I'm sure he knows a little bit about calculus too. So
I did take calculus.
So,
2 years in college.
There you go. Well, let's go to our friends in Battlefield, Fredericksburg.
All right, Mr. Lofton, we have two more good questions. First question is kind of a two-part question. When you were playing, did you ever watch another wide receiver and you just say, wow, that guy is amazing? And if you were to compare yourself to a modern-day wide receiver, just to give a perspective to my guys who weren't even thought of in the 80s, who would you compare yourself to as a player to today, a wide receiver that's playing today?
Well, what's interesting is players are getting bigger, faster, and stronger all the time. And in 1978, when I first came into the National Football League, a big offensive lineman was a guy who was 6'5", 280 pounds. And that's not a big lineman anymore. That would be a big quarterback. Now, Ben Roethlisberger, who plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is about 6'5", 250 pounds. So the linemen have grown, the wide receivers have gotten bigger. When I came into the league, I was 6'3", about 190 pounds. I went up to, eventually up to about 197 pounds, and I was considered a big wide receiver. When I was with the San Diego Chargers, I coached the wide receiver by the name of Vincent Jackson. Our skill set, the way we move is very similar, and the way that he runs and the way that he leaps to go up and catch the ball is very similar. Well, like I said, I was 6'3", 197 pounds. I was a little faster than Vincent ever was, but Vincent Jackson is 6'5", 235 pounds. So like I said, players continue to grow. The offensive linemen get bigger every year, but there's always space for the kind of the underdog guy. Because if Wes Welker walked by your room, who's a wide receiver for the New England Patriots, nobody would, even glance twice at him, because Wes Welker's 5'9", he weighs 185 pounds. So he's not real big, but he has the heart of a champion. And so that's what you're really looking for. It's kind of what's inside of a guy that really determines what he wants to do and what he can do on or off the football field.
I think for some reason the Patriots really find those guys like Wes Welker, Danny Woodhead, someone who is not physically imposing at all, but they fit within the system. And you're only as good as the system is. So, and that's the same thing can be applied to here as a staff here at the Hall of Fame in your classroom. We all work together for the achievement of success and whether that success means us being a $1 billion company or a $1 million company, that's all relative. But if we all work hard to achieve the goal, then we can all walk away at the end of the day, feeling good about ourselves and knowing that we tried our best at being a world-class institution. So go ahead with another question there, Battlefield.
Peer pressure is really big here at our school. We try to sway our students away from overcoming that peer pressure. So do you have any advice for staying away from the peer pressure situations, and were you ever involved in anything like that in middle school and high school, and how did you overcome that, the peer pressure going in the wrong direction?
Well, see, and it's funny because I was going to turn it around. I think peer pressure is great because peer pressure can be to do the positive thing. Just like I talked to the other group about, okay, on our team this year we're going to have a non-curse rule, and anybody who curses, owes you 50 push-ups or something like that. So you can have peer pressure, and it can be positive because we always think of peer pressure as the kids who are being drugged down, and that really is the peer pressure that you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid, drugs and alcohol and things that you wouldn't want to do with your parents watching. You really think about it, and it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and think, hey, one day I'm going to be a 45-year-old man or a 40-year-old woman, and I'm going to have kids of my own, what would I want them to do? And the peer pressure stuff is really tempting. You see a lot of it in the movies. There's a TV show that I like that's on right now called Parenthood. And for any of you guys who watched that, the last couple episodes, there's a young girl in there. She's about to graduate from high school, and she's going through a lot of changes, and she starts to delve into drugs and alcohol. And in the last episode, right at the end of the episode, she ends up in a car crash where the driver is under the influence of drugs and alcohol. So, those are decisions that you guys have to make. And the peer pressure, don't think that everybody's doing it, because everybody's not doing it. But the peer pressure, you guys exert the peer pressure on those kids to get them to stop, to get them to change their life. And that's the peer pressure that can be positive, doing the right thing. And maybe get some peer pressure and get a group of kids together who are going to clean up the area that surrounds the campus or something like that. Those are positive things that, yeah, that's peer pressure, but that's a positive peer pressure, and that's what you want.
Thank you, Mr. Lofton.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Battlefield. We'll go to one more question from the couple of schools that are in Robbinsdale. Do you have a last question there that you would like to ask?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, ask him.
All right, well, I was wondering, have you ever had any, problem with sports? Like, I have asthma and I've just gone into track, and I was wondering if you have had any problems with stuff like that, if you had any, asthma or anything like that.
Well, like I said, I was an athlete, and I still like to believe that I still am an athlete. I compete in some age group stuff, but I'm also a parent. So all those things that you guys are going through, my kids have gone through. I've had, my middle son right now just finished up his football career. He was a senior this past year, and he thought he was going to have a great senior year, and he ended up being second string behind a guy who was a sophomore. So to fly to his games, to support him, and he would play 8 or 10 plays a game, and he would be disappointed and dejected. But the thing that you have to realize, with your asthma, you're just trying to overcome it. You're trying to manage it. There may be medicine or whatever you can do. But the great thing about sports, and you heard Jerry talk about being a success. I once had somebody say to me, success is not a destination, but a means of traveling. So what you're trying to do, you're trying to accomplish all that you can, be the best that you can, which is that old Army slogan. But it doesn't mean that you're going to win every game. We talked about the kids over in Battlefield who are 0-6. There's a journey that they're going through. And you hear that terminology a lot, like now, people on a journey. And you really are. So you're trying to be successful, but there's not an end road that says, okay, when I get to this point, I'm successful. It's a means of traveling. It's how you want to live your life. It's an attitude that you take. You want to be successful in your thoughts and your actions. That's why when we're looking at these 6 pillars that build your character, like I said, we're a work in progress. You guys are a work in progress. And, I'm looking at your classroom, and Locke, who was kind of the guy who, is sitting there in the middle and in his flip-flops and asking some questions, he must have the respect of the other kids in the classroom. And I'm pretty sure that he has, some pretty good citizenship. And you guys must care about him to let him be your spokesperson. Now, somebody go and pop him on the back of the head now because I said all those good things about him. But, you look at those 6 pillars, and they're important, and they're a means of growing and being successful.
I didn't get to see it. Did anybody pop him in the back of the head?
They'll get him later.
Okay. We don't want to get you suspended in school. You can blame it on Mr. Lofton. Let's go for the last question of the program. Let's go back to Battlefield. If you guys have one closing question you'd like to ask there.
Yes, we do have one more question. Did you find it hard to focus on achieving your goals of playing football? And was football always your goal? Like, when did you know that you were going to make it to the NFL? Was that always your goal?
It's funny. I mentioned earlier that I was a track and field All-American, and I actually was having a lot more success in track and field than I ever had in football. When I was in high school, I was the California State long jump champion. And that had been a goal of mine. That was a goal that I set when I was in the 10th grade, that I wanted to be the league champion one year, the city champion next year, the state champion, and also win the national championship. And I was able to accomplish those. And it's funny because those were individual goals. Football was more of a team goal. And for our football team, and I mentioned my high school, we had not one game.
The conference is about to end.
Whoa.
Don't worry, that's just our 5-minute warning from our bridge. We're good.
So in football, I did set goals later on, but like I mentioned, for the first 3 years in college, you know, I was kind of a second string, third string guy. And it was funny, I was interviewed during track season my junior year, and I made the bold statement that I was going to be better in the pros than I was in college. And a lot of people thought, well, you know, here's a guy who's just shooting his mouth off, and maybe I was a little bit, but I had that confidence. And I think that's one of the things that you have to have confidence in yourself, but you also have to be willing to put in the work. Heard Jerry talking about preparation, and you know, I mentioned I'm real big on quotes. And another one is, if you fail to plan to do something, you kind of plan to fail. So yeah, write down goals that you have, and you might want to keep them to yourself. You might want to share them with a buddy. Because if you share them with one buddy, you know, sure, he may laugh at them a little bit, but he's going to keep you accountable. And he's going to make sure, he's going to be your peer pressure to make sure that you're doing the positive things that you have to do to accomplish those goals. So maybe, like we saw that one class that was about to get started with calculus, it might be your goal to get a B in calculus. Well, what do you have to do to get a B in calculus? Well, the first thing you probably have to do is show up for class every day. The next thing you have to do is sit and pay attention in class. Do all the homework that's required of you. And when the homework starts to get tough, go to your teacher and ask your teacher for help. So you've made a plan, you've kind of mapped it out, you've written it down, maybe you shared it with somebody so that you guys can have this goal together and work together on it. Because two people can do a lot more than one person can by himself. And when I look back on my sports career, I was aided and assisted by so many people. And I didn't realize that. I talked to my friends now, and they said, man, you were so focused, you were so driven. I was just having fun. I enjoyed going to workout. I enjoyed going to practice and all the things that you had to do to be an athlete. It was something that I found out that I was passionate about when I was early on. And, you know, sure, I ended up in the Hall of Fame as a football player, but as a basketball player, not very good. Baseball player, not very good. But I found a couple things that I was good at, and I continued on them, and I was successful. But the journey didn't end. Like I said, it's a means of travel.
And I think that's a great note to end on. I think two things that stood out for me that Mr. Lofton shared is number one, obviously preparation, but number two is, I've heard him say this over and over again, is finding something you're passionate about doing. So, you know, we just want to say thanks to all the schools that tuned in here today. But if you can all unmute your mics and please join me in giving a warm round of applause and saying thank you to Hall of Famer James Lofton.